So welcome everybody. This is the webinar Wednesday, 10 great new features in P5 version 6.1. I'm David Fox, that's me, JPY, with a UK Archiware partner. Plus I work a lot with them on webinars, funnily enough. Josef's here as well. Hi Josef.
Yeah, hi David.
Hi.
Also from me, a warm welcome. Hi guys.
Yeah, so you're the CEO of Archiware, I hear.
Definitely, yes, that's me.
CEO and chief cyclist. So Josef's in Germany, I'm in the UK, and I guess you guys are all over the place. So let's get going. Let me just play my screen so you can see the live screen. So this is going to be about 30 minutes of content, including mostly demos. We'll take questions at the end. You've got a questions panel in your GoToWebinar UI. So please type questions in there because we want to have a nice lively question and answer session at the end. We're going to be talking about LTFS a fair bit in this webinar, which you probably know because that's why you're here. So we're really interested to know what you think of the way that LTFS is implemented in P5 and how you're using LTFS. So think about that whilst you're watching the presentation, and we like to hear questions at the end. Josef's here as well, so he can answer all the difficult questions. So yeah, we'll send you a copy of the YouTube link to this webinar. We had a session earlier for the kind of European time zone, so we'll see which one's got the best questions for publishing. So in this webinar, the orange things are P5 archives. So we've got the LTFS support to talk about and to show you. We've got some updates to the P5 companion app. I'm going to show you the P5 companion app in properly detail so that you can get a recap on that if you're not familiar with it. There's a couple of smaller features, like we now do poster frames for video previews, as well as playable proxies. Plus we've got FFmpeg and ImageMagick open source tools built in now, so you don't need to install those, where P5 runs to get the benefit of previews in archive. And then P5 Sync, we've got a couple of smallish features. We've got merging of source folders into a single destination in a controlled way. We've got some enhanced checksum stuff going on in P5 Sync. We've got live updates in the browser, software updates, and we've got some changes to volume management. So, but most of what I want to show you is the archive stuff at the top there. So a couple of slides just to tell you a bit more about LTFS support. LTFS support has been added to P5 Archive. So P5 Archive, if you're not familiar with it, currently works with a proprietary LTO tape format, and what it does is it archives stuff to tape, files, media files. It provides an index, so everything that you have archived across all of your tapes, across a tape library full of tapes, or cloud storage or disk storage, is all in an index which you can search. You can see thumbnails and previews. It's kind of like an asset management system that covers everything that you've archived. So what we've done with P5 version 6.1 is we've added LTFS volumes as a supported tape format for this workflow. So the workflow remains the same as it did before. So if you're currently archiving to LTO tapes, the P5 proprietary format, you can now add LTFS volumes to your workflow. You could use those wholesale for everything. You could do a bit of both. It's completely flexible. So you have two options. So in order to start using LTFS volumes, the pool window where you configure the tape storage that you're going to use now has an LTFS option. So when you're choosing to use for archive media type tape, you get to choose between the P5 native, which is the format that we've had all along, and LTFS. So you can just choose. You can start labeling tapes in your standalone drive or your tape library, and we retain all of the automated support for tapes in a library. So if you label 50 tapes to be LTFS, start throwing data across those 50 LTO8 LTFS tapes, then everything is indexed and we manage the movement of the tapes in the library. So everything is still supported in terms of the hardware support. All the same vendors for the tape libraries and the tape drives. And LTFS support is on Mac, Windows, Linux, FreeBSD. And the Linux side means it will also work on a QNAP where we can have a SAS interface going out to a tape drive. So there are some differences between the native P5 format and the LTFS format. which are covered in this table, which I'll try not to spend too much time on. So as I said, single drive and library support, both formats are fine with that. We support Mac OS, Windows, Linux, and FreeBSD, which should be on that slide. We'll span large files across tapes. So if we're getting towards the end of the tape and we've got a file which we're not going to complete, it'll get split. They'll get joined back together if you're restoring through P5. If you're using some non-P5 software to access those LTFS tapes, you can join those files together quite easily with a simple terminal command. We do verification by checksum for both formats, so you can be sure that the data is being correctly written because we're writing a checksum and then reading the data back and making sure it sums to the same checksum. P5 Companion, which is the desktop application, can support this because it's just a different pool type. And I said we'll show you P5 Companion drag and drop archiving in a couple of minutes. Things that aren't supported on the LTFS side are block level cloning. So this is a feature that's much used by P5 archive customers who want to have their data written across 2 tapes simultaneously. So if you've got 2 tape drives, with the native P5 LTO format, you can have 2 tapes being written that have identical blocks, identical data. One is a replacement for the other. So often people take one tape off site for redundancy, geographical separation, and so on. Can't do that with LTFS because the LTFS spec just doesn't allow that block level access. Drive parallelization, that's a long word. That means that you can have more than one tape in a drive spinning to get really fast throughput to multiple tapes at once. That works with the native format, but not with the LTFS. Multiple jobs writing to the same tape, that's fairly self-explanatory. So if you've already got a big archive job writing data, you can spin up another one with the P5 native format and add data via a separate job. So that's not possible with LTFS. Importing tapes, currently that is doable. You can take a foreign volume written by a P5 native tape and pull that in. That's not possible with LTFS, although you can put an LTFS tape in a drive and kind of see what's on it. So that's not so critical, but the next version of P5 will include the ability to import LTFS tapes and have their contents in your P5 archive index. So that's coming in a future release. So we'll get an extra tick. Verify by rereading content. That's not possible with LTFS, but we do have the checksum verification, so that's not such a big deal. And the final tick that LTFS format gets that P5 native format doesn't is, of course, that LTFS is a vendor non-specific format, so you can use lots of different types of software to read LTFS tapes, including free software that's provided by some of the tape drive vendors. So yeah, you can't do that with the native format. You've got to use Archiware to access the native LTO format, but LTFS are entirely portable, as illustrated in this slide, where you can see on the left-hand side we've got the P5 archive product, which is the one with the orange arrow. That can read and write to your LTFS tapes and index everything, but any one of those tapes can be used to read by a third-party piece of software. For example, Yoyota, which we're going to use in our demo in a minute to show you how we can read a P5 archive LTFS tape with a third-party piece of software. So that's the workflow, and this is the demo. So let's just flick back to my desktop, my browser. I'm probably going to need to log back into my P5 admin interface. So this is 6.1 with the default password. And you see the familiar P5 UI here. So I've done a few bits of configuration here to give us a nice quick demo. What I've done is I've created a pool which is called LTFS Tape Archive, and that one is set up where the format is going to be LTFS. So you can see LTFS was selected, shows up here in my list as well. I've also got a disk pool to do some disk archiving as well for speed when I show you P5 Companion. And then I've got one tape labeled. So I've got a fairly clunky old LTO5 drive here. I've labeled one tape, which is in the drive at the moment. And so we can do an archive to that tape. So I've already set up an archive plan here called LTFS Archive, which is going to archive to that pool. And I've got a folder on my desktop here called For Archiving, which has got some image JPEG files in it, and it's also got a movie. Not a lot of data because we don't want to wait hours while it archives. So if I just go into manual archiving, browse to my desktop where I'll see the same folders that you can see on the Finder desktop on the right hand side. If I stick the for archiving folder into my archive selection of things I want to archive, go ahead and archive that using that LTFS archive pool and hit the start button. I get a quick warning there to say make sure that there are enough LTFS tapes available to accommodate the amount of data that you're archiving. So that's because you need to label in advance all the LTFS tapes that this job is going to need to write. So if you need to look at the terabytes that fit on a tape and the terabytes that you have to archive, and make sure you've got enough tapes available. So the job monitor is then running, which has got a slight redesign in 6.1 insofar as we've got this queued jobs section. So we separate out jobs which are queued to run on a scheduler at some point in the next 24 hours versus jobs which are running in the middle and finished jobs at the bottom. And you can move these things around and collapse them and so on for a bit more flexibility in the UI. So you see that job's running. It's already unmounting the tape actually, so it's written the data. There's a separate partition on an LTFS tape that stores an index, a list of the files that are on the tape, plus the actual data partition. So I've configured this job to generate the clips, which are the previews. So you can see those being generated now. And once that's finished, we'll be able to close the job monitor, go into the archive index where we would go to find stuff to restore, and then I'll be able to see in the traditional and familiar way we have the folder that we archived. We can drill in and see the thumbnails for a given folder of JPEGs over on the right hand side there. I can double click on one of those to see the properties for it, like so. And if I go back to the for archiving folder, you'll see that there is a thumbnail for the MOV video file as well, which is one of the new features. So you get both a thumbnail from the video and plus the playable proxy that's configured and created at whatever resolution and length you want via the archive plan, so that you have a visual representation of this file that's in the archive. So all this data in the index could be restored by clicking on restore, and P5 will figure that it's on the LTFS tape that's in the drive that we want to go and recover from. So that's all exactly the same workflow that you're familiar with. But just to do things make things a bit more interesting, because we are looking at LTFS, I'm going to stop P5 at this point and switch to a different software product for a couple of minutes. So you can see the same data being restored using Yoyota. So Yoyota is a LTFS software product that runs on a Mac. I've pre-configured it so that it knows about the tape drive, and I've set up a restore folder. So all I need to do is click the green arrow button, and I can hear the LTO drive over my right shoulder coming back to life, making noises for me. And if we look in that Yoyota restore folder on the desktop, which is the target location for this restore, in a few moments we should see those files arriving in the folder. So Yoyota does also let you go and browse the folder structure on the tape, maybe make a small selection of files that you want to recover, but we only wrote a few files on the tape, so once it's located them, it won't take very long for them to be recovered back to our folder on the desktop there. So yeah, this kind of workflow could be used for sending data on some number of tapes to another location using the archive module, and then those tapes will be readable by a foreign system. So you can see some progress there. There's 75 files being restored, 74 are JPEGs, one is a movie. Yoyota outputs some additional media hash list files and reports about what it did, but our data is in users admin desktop for archiving, and then you can see the data has been pulled off the tape fairly quickly there, and it's the exact same data that we originally archived from the desktop, including the 1-inch Dreams guys hovering above the rocks there. That's one of the Archiware promotional videos that you'll find on the YouTube channel. Those guys use Archiware to edit the videos of the crazy stuff that they get up to. So the tape drive's gone quiet, so I think I can safely quit Yoyota and then start Archiware backup, which I'm just doing using the terminal command. And then once Archiware reports that it's got its URL available again, I'll flick back to the browser up here, and I'll continue to show you a quick demo of the P5 companion app. So let's just refresh in here and log back in. So for speed, I have I've configured a separate archive plan that archives to disk so that everything will happen more or less instantly. And I'm going to fire up, this has been running whilst we've been shutting the P5 server, so I'll just rerun it. So I'll fire up the P5 companion app, which has been redesigned so that it simply has 3 tabs at the top where we specify what we want to archive, we monitor jobs, we restore stuff, and over on the right hand side here you point it at the P5 server on the network that's going to do archiving for you. So you can install this P5 companion app on Mac and Windows desktops on as many of those as you wish, with a single P5 archive server that's going to be archiving to tape, LTFS, cloud, disk, wherever you want it to be archiving. And the idea is that you can do everything with a drag and drop interface. One thing to show you actually for existing users is it now interrogates the P5 server, shows you a list of the archive plans that you can use. So if I go back to that for archiving folder that we've already archived, I can add images or folders. Sorry, I'm in the wrong tab. Let's just OK that. So I need to be in the archive tab. So I need to specify something to archive. So let's put the biking folder of JPEGs in there. Let's put the movie in there, and then we hit next. If we want to specify some metadata that we can later search on because it gets recorded in the index, we can do that at this step. And then we hit the archive button, which moves us to the job monitor window where we can see our job running. So much like the job monitor window in the web interface, this just shows us what's happening. So we've got some expectation of how long our job's going to take. And when it finishes, what P5 does is it replaces the original file with the P5C, P5 companion stub file, which is only a few bytes in size. And the same thing will have happened in the biking folder. In fact, let me just switch to this view here so we've got a better way of seeing stuff. So yeah, there's the images, there's the biking. So you can see those have all been replaced with these P5C stub files, which occupy very little space. If I'm interested in knowing what one of those files represents, I can use the Restore tab. I can drag a couple of those files in here, and then P5 will look these up in the index and tell me what it knows about them. So it can show me metadata captured, and it can show me previews for the files. And then if I'm happy with that selection, I just hit the Restore button, and that will submit a job back to the server that will restore the original files. So you can see there that the P5C files that are highlighted have the original JPEGs next to them. And then if I wanted to, I could either delete those P5C files or leave them there for another time. And the same thing works with videos. So this P5C represents an MOV file, which we will get the playable proxy visible within this interface. So I can look to see what that file was when I archived it. And then if I want to pull that one back too, then that just takes a click, and there's the original file come back. So this app just makes archiving as simple as drag and drop. So you can have all the power of a tape library sitting on your LAN with a P5 software driving it, and then people can just drag and drop from a file system, freeing up space as the original media files get replaced by these tiny stub files, but have the functionality of being able to restore from the same interface. But of course, everything that gets archived via this application shows up in the archive index here back in the browser. So it's no different to archiving via other methods, via integration with your MAM or manual archiving in the browser. Everything shows up and is searchable in this interface here as well. So let me just flick back to my slides because I've probably gone slightly ahead of myself. So I've got this slide here, which is telling us about the updated P5 companion app. So that's what we just saw. Also the poster frame for video previews, so that's a new feature that I showed you briefly a moment ago. So where we have a video file, we capture both a still frame from the file and the proxy video, so that when you're looking at a folder of movies, you get a grid of thumbnails to look at. Previously, we didn't generate static thumbnails from video files. P5 Archive also includes a built-in FFmpeg and Image Magic. So those two tools, which are represented by the icons there, are both open source projects, quite mature ones, have been around for many years, very heavily used in the media sphere because they can generate and convert media files, both still images and video. So previously, we've always, well, for a long time, we've leveraged these open source products to have previews generated by P5 Archive, but it required that they were installed on the OS that P5 was running on. So now P5 includes them. P5 updates will include updated versions of them, so there's really nothing extra to install. You can still run specific plug-in versions or particular versions of software, or indeed your own tools if you want to, but if you don't specify any different, then we will be using the built-in tools, which makes things a lot easier, especially if you're archiving from a P5 client host back to a server. The P5 client needs to have Image Magic and FFmpeg installed, and sometimes that would result in having to install those tools in lots of different places. So this makes rolling out the P5 infrastructure much simpler. So we've got a couple of points on P5 Synchronize now to have a look at. The first one is merging source folders into one destination. So I've got a blog article that I'll just show you to help illustrate this. So generally speaking, P5 Synchronize is all about replicating files and folders from one host to another host. And on the source host, you can have several different folders that are being copied to a single folder on the destination. So in this example here, we might have these two paths going to the data A and data B directories, and we're going to replicate those to this folder called target folder on the destination machine. So historically with P5, that results in the target folder receiving the full path of the source folders. So you potentially end up with quite long paths on the target end, which might not exactly suit what you want to see there. So with 6.1, when you're specifying the source folders, you can introduce a dot as a path element, which doesn't have to actually exist on the file system, but indicates to P5 that only the folder structure after the dot needs to be recreated at the target folder. So this would result, if we configured it like this, it would result in our target folder having the data A and data B folders created directly inside without the other intermediate folders in the middle. So I can show you this in action because I've got a sync plan here configured, and I've got a Linux client machine which has 3 home directories on it. Freddie, Radhika and Tracy all have desktop folders, and I want to copy that stuff, the contents of those desktops, into my target folder, which is configured on the local host machine down here. So ordinarily, if I just didn't have the dots, in here I would get home, and then inside of home I would get each of those users and their desktops. So the dots here will chop out the home part. So if I just run this now, you'll see that in action, and you'll see just the Freddie and Radhika and Tracy folders being created in the target folder, and then inside of each one of those we'll copy across whatever was in the folder on the Linux client host. So that's quite a simple feature and implemented by just adding the dots into the path, but I think people that use P5 Sync in a workflow will really appreciate that kind of level of flexibility. So that's the merging of folders. And then the other thing which exists within P5 Synchronize 6.1 is that we allow the creation of checksums of the checksum format of your choice. So this is a bit of the UI from a sync plan where you can set up file verification, and we have SHA, well, we have various different MD5 and SHA checksums. And as well, P5 synchronizers always use checksums to validate the reading of a file versus the writing of a file to make sure that everything is the same. What's happening here is that we have a broader selection of checksum types that the user can choose from their preferences, and we store the checksum on the target file being written onto the target file system as an extended attribute, and you can see some text at the bottom there which is exposing that. So let's have a quick look at that in action. So the files that we just wrote here will actually have these checksums embedded inside of them because they were written by the sync plan that I've got configured over here, and that option is selected here to make SHA 256 checksums. So we can see those in various ways, but one way is to use the X attribute command on a Mac to print. Well, actually, first of all, what we can do is just pass a file to X attribute, and it will tell us that there is an attribute with this name attached to that file. So then I can ask it to print that attribute for that file, and we will see the contents of it. So that is a SHA 256 checksum that's been embedded in the file. And if I were to run SHA sum -a 256, which is the Mac OS and probably Linux command too, to show a to create a checksum and run it, you'll see that we end up with the same big hex string here because the checksum that we just calculated for that file matches the one that P5 also calculated when it was writing the file on the file system. So the idea of exposing this as an extended attribute is really to allow customers to have workflows whereby they are they can have scripts that control this, that can be checked out, or you can generate via a simple shell script a report for all the checksums of files in a folder and compare that with something that you may already hold. Okay, so those are the new options available in Synchronize. So the next slide is, I like this one a lot, it's updating P5 in the browser. So we now have a software update menu selection that allows you to check the version of P5 against Archiware's download server and pull down and restart the software and install the update. So you can see the bit of UI warns you that you should make sure obviously that there are no jobs running because it's going to require a restart. And as a precaution, you should probably have backups of your P5 configuration and indexes, because you know, this is something that we would always recommend if you're doing a software update anyway, as a good kind of precaution, and to also make sure that your P5 licenses are under maintenance so that you're entitled to the latest version. So a few things to check. This works on Mac OS and Linux. It could work on all operating systems, but Windows likes to keep a database of software versions installed. So if you go updating software, as with any software package outside of the official Windows installer, then the OS can get out of date. And also with QNAP and Synology, they have a similar package installer infrastructures that keep track of versions. So really you should just use this on Mac OS and Linux and use the regular installers on the other operating systems. And then the final point is the optimized volume management for cloud workflows. So anybody that's using P5 to write, archive and backup data to cloud storage through Amazon Web Services, Backblaze and so on will know that you need to have a staging area configured where P5 can organize the files that are going to be uploaded to the cloud, and also a place where files can be downloaded from the cloud in order to reassemble chunks of data in the cloud for restoring data, files and folders back onto your storage. So this has been optimized and is far more efficient and needs far less space in version 6.1. So whereas before we were recommending 10% of the total amount of data in the cloud should be reserved as a local file system for this staging area. We're now just probably recommending something like a couple of 100 gigabytes is necessary at most to assemble the data when uploading and downloading. So that's a big convenience factor, because it means you have to provision far less local storage when using cloud storage. So that makes things much easier for everybody. Okay, so obligatory, you can download and get hold of a trial eval. So if you're new to P5 watching this webinar and are thinking this could be interesting for me to test, then we're all up for that. You can download, get yourself a 30-day fully functional, unlimited, unrestricted copy of the software. Plus you can get assistance from Archiware in getting your trial set up. And you can always download the latest copy of the software from the URL in the blue box. And that's pretty much it as far as the demo goes. So I hope you all found that interesting. Like I said earlier, we're really interested on feedback on how people are using LTFS in the field, as it were, how people want to use LTFS. Does this help? Are you already using archive to LTO tapes and you're going to start writing LTFS instead of regular LTO from the Archiware format, and so on. So I see we're getting some questions in the question box, so I'll go through those. Joseph, are you around to help me out with
I'm there.
with answers? Good.
Yes, sure.
So let's go through them. So some admin things. Rick says, will I be able to get a copy of the slide deck? Yep, you will. We'll send you all an email with a PDF of the slides plus a YouTube link to this video. So Cameron asks, all options irrelevant for Windows, correct? I'm not sure what you're asking there. Irrelevant. All options are supported on Windows. So everything that you just saw, including the LTFS support, runs on Windows. So yeah, that's the case. You've said irrelevant for Windows though, so maybe you want to clarify. I'm just going to delete these questions as I'm answering them so I don't read them out twice. Matt, hi Matt, over in Vancouver. To be able to archive in P5 Companion app, I'm reading his question now, you need to put the paths to the storage locations to be archived. That's easy for shared storage that is known, but what about external drives which an editor may want to archive? Can it be archived without a path? Okay, so this is a techie question regarding the need for P5 to know where P5 Companion will be archiving from, so that it can find the files and convert the paths from the workstations from the perspective of a mounted network volume to the path on the server, which will be different. So those two paths have to be managed and understood somehow. In order to do that, P5 requires that you tell it about the location. So there isn't a way to archive without adding to the group, is there, Joseph? That has to be done. So if somebody's inserting a hard drive into a Mac desktop,
so
then
we're talking about a desktop, or so a Mac, in example, you're connecting a USB disk drive to a Mac, and you like to archive data which are on this USB drives. Yes.
Yeah.
So this is very easy. You only have to add /volume to your group, and that's it.
Okay. Yeah. Good point. So yeah, just the folder above the mount point for any of those disks that you're going to plug in, Matt, and then it will be able to locate via that relative to that volumes folder. It'll figure out where everything is. Yeah. So there you go. That's answered. If that doesn't make sense, more questions in the box. Could you please demonstrate FFmpeg configuration? I can. This is from Cameron. Thanks for the question, Cameron. So yeah, I'll just drop back here to here, move that out of the way. So if we look at one of my archive plans that we ran earlier, like the LTFS one, the previews are generated via the tab here, previews. So this is my FFmpeg, this is my ImageMagick. These were created in this list just by clicking the new button and adding from the drop-down menu for a basic configuration. This gives you something that works and then you can tweak it. So the FFmpeg configuration is in this window here. So basically, for each file that is being archived from maybe thousands that you're archiving. Each file, first of all, we look up in the list here to see if we have a file extension that matches, to see if we're going to...
David, can I interrupt you?
You can, you did.
Can, uh, probably the best is if you would delete it, so then the user will see how easy it is to add it again.
That's a good point. Yeah, let's get rid of both of these. So delete, delete, remove. So this is how the archive plan begins with no preview generators. So we click on the new button. We want to have a preview generator for using the FFmpeg tool. So then we get the window that we were looking at. This is an example list of video file formats that you can add to. But basically, if the file that you're archiving is an MP4, therefore it's covered by this preview generator, then we will use the configuration below. So what we have here is an FFmpeg command, which is actually what we are going to run to generate this preview file, which can be configured by just using the drop downs above here to keep it simple. But if you want to come in here and tweak this, then you're welcome to do that to make FFmpeg work for a particular file format. So you might be using a proprietary format where FFmpeg needs some tweaking in terms of the parameters that it's called with for the proprietary format. So in that case, you would put up here the file extension for your Avid RAW or whatever, and then down here you can configure FFmpeg accordingly. Now if FFmpeg doesn't support your Avid RAW file as an example, then maybe there's another command line tool which can, in which case you can configure a custom preview generator here, which basically, rather than giving you the FFmpeg syntax, just requires that you provide your own shell script, and then we'll pass the asset that we need to render the preview for to your script, and your script will return back a proxy video file that P5 will use to link up into the index. So yeah, without going into too much detail, that's the basic anatomy of how FFmpeg is configured. So I hope that helps. Of course, you can grab a trial. Joseph?
David, you could show the group and the group configuration for Medix. So how to add the volume path.
Yeah, Matt's been speaking to me a little bit via Slack actually, and he's been doing this already. But yeah, this is, so I've just clicked on stuff without explaining, but down here in the group preferences, you have the admin group, and typically you would add a combination to this list of a client machine. So maybe I want to archive from my Linux machine, and then a path on that machine which sits at least above a location where I want to archive from. And then that means that on the Linux machine, anything beneath this data share path can now be archived via the P5 companion app, and P5, the server, will be able to locate that data on that client and transfer the data directly from the Linux machine back to the P5 server running on the Mac, to the tape drive, or wherever we're archiving to. Okay, I'm just going to go back to the question box. Another question from Matt. Setting up new clients after a 6.1 upgrade requires resetting up all the passwords. Yeah, that's true. There is the NDS chat command, but this could be better maybe. Setting up a lot of workstations can be updated to 6.1, then reset their backup connect to the server is not seamless, needs to be automated. Streamline with a pref to configure the connection back to the server. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there is a command line introduced not that long ago, isn't there, Joseph, that allows a password to be reset on a P5 host remotely. I'm pretty sure that was.
I do not have this on my list, David, to be honest. So yeah, I don't know.
It was intended to be added, or it was added, because I know that if a password was forgotten on an installation, it was a little bit tricky to reset it. So I'll point you at that. Well, I need to check that, Matt, but let me do that, and then I'll point you at the resource that might help you there. for that particular thing. If it turns out that that doesn't exist, then we'll take that as a feature request, and maybe we'll get something done there. Cameron says thank you. You're welcome, Cameron. It's Matt again. P5A compatibility is good in the companion app. Yeah, so we had a previous, the P5 companion app, which is this one that I was showing you. I'll just click on it so that there's something to see. It has replaced a previous tool that was called the P5 Archive. What was it called? P5 Archive app. The P5 Archive app also created stub files. Those were slightly different to the P5C files, and this new version of the P5 companion supports the legacy P5 archive files. So I'm just saying that to give a bit of context to what to Matt's question. So he says the compatibility is good, but the migration from the archive app to the new app is not easy without support from dropping a folder of P5A files. One by one is okay for someone. Oh, okay, so it's basically bulk restore of the P5A files. Maybe it's quicker to do it by visiting the archive index and making a selection in there if possible. But yeah, I get that. I personally haven't tested that yet, Matt, but I get that that might be slightly long-winded. But at least they are supported, and there is a route now for getting them restored. Yeah, quick hack. Yeah, so Matt's just also remarking on the fix by using the volumes folder. Yeah, so we could probably put that in some documentation to make that clearer for people. Cameron says excellent, much appreciated. That's great. Thank you for the feedback. I'll show the yes, Matt says show the volumes path hack, so I will. So let me just close down there so I can see the screen. So yeah, what you would do, Matt, is within the admin group, you would under localhost, you would add an additional folder, or maybe it's the only folder, just pointing at volumes like that and adding that to the list, and then any file system mounted under volumes on this local machine will be able to have data archived. So if Linux client was the desktop that I wanted to be doing the archiving from, then I would do the same thing there. Linux, it's not obviously not a Mac, but yeah, the same thing would apply. So yeah, it's just as simple as adding /volumes with a capital V to any Mac that you wish to archive from. Okay. Another question from Cameron. P5 gives me a server not found illegal response message on start. I haven't been able to use it. Okay. Well, off the top of my head, I can't tell you that that's an obvious error with a fix that I can think of, but you need to make a ticket. I don't know where you are in the world, Cameron, but you need to make a ticket with your reseller. If you're in the States, that will go back to the local US Archiware support guys, and they'll be able to help you out. So yeah, you need to make a support ticket and send some information in. You can do that via support.archiware.com if you're stuck. Couple of things from Matt just confirming, and yeah, there is a command line available that Matt's just shown me. So yeah, if you need to, Archiware support will be able to tell you what that command is. I won't read it out. And yeah, USA from Cameron. Okay, so that's the list of questions that we had. Thanks everybody for sticking around. We got a really good turnout for this webinar, so there's obviously quite a bit of interest in LTFS. Nobody's really asked any specific questions around LTFS or said how they're using it. I think the way that Archiware have introduced LTFS into this existing workflow is great, but we're really interested to get feedback on whether this works in your environment, because obviously there's lots of different ways that LTFS can be used in a production kind of environment. But yeah, it doesn't look like anybody's has any more questions to pose. So just to repeat that we will send you a link, a PDF to the slides, a video, Thanks to the people that are saying thanks. Yeah, Matt says the P5 index for LTFS volumes is awesome. Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think if you're writing a pile of LTFS tapes, the problem that everybody will have is that you've got thousands of files across a bunch of tapes and you don't know where they are, what you've got, and how to restore something very easily. So the P5 way of working hopefully solves that problem. So thanks to all those people that are thanking me in the chat and so on. We'll wind it up. That was 45 minutes. I'm David. Joseph, thanks very much for your help.
Thank you very much, guys. Yeah, thank you, David.
And
did a great job.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. Thanks for attending. See you again soon.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye for now.